Eu sou muito quieto. Boa noite.
Boa noite.
Good. Unfortunately, I don't really like to be the bearer of bad news, but I just received a message from Kenny Monteiro, and due to some conflicting time, Looney Johnson and Nailsa won't be able to be here tonight. Look at their faces. Everyone gets. No. So I feel thrilled to be here, and especially to speak amongst, I call you guys peers, you know. I'm maybe, a certain age, but I'm still young. I look young. I am young. But, the reason why I'm here, I wanted to speak to you guys a little bit about, I want to talk to you about my background and some of the work that I do. And especially when we live in a place, nowadays where, generations past the revolution of Cape Verde, where the question of cultural identity always comes in place. And we're always trying to find ourselves as, as Cape Verdeans. And oftentimes, being especially, I grew up, since I migrated to the US, I grew up in Connecticut. And where, although not many people are aware that there are Cape Verdeans in Connecticut, but in 2000, according to the census, there were about 15,000 Cape Verdeans residing in Connecticut. So I would just imagine how much that number has increased. And so the reason I moved back here, which I'll speak more in details in a little while, was just more, to be in that second, the 11th island, as many of the politicians call Massachusetts. Some call Rhode Island the 11th island, but I believe right here, Brockton is that, island. And a lot of what I noticed that most of us fall, and many of us try to reject, we fall into that prejudice of what a Cape Verdean is, and that is to blame, the news is to blame for most part. And for a lot of times, we face criticisms, and we neglect, and oftentimes many people refuse to see the positive impact that we do have within our community. And my biggest concern is, actually, no, I'll just say this. For me, being Cape Verdean, or being a professional, and as I would give my advice to you as you go forward, graduate, think of yourself as being a professional. Be the best that you can be in what you do. And at the end of the day, just say that you're a Cape Verdean. Because that's what we all need to do as Cape Verdeans. So, today I want to speak to you a little bit, as I mentioned before, about my background, where I was raised, and what I do, and where I'm going now. I was born in the island of Fogo. How many people from Fogo here? Oh, the hands up. Okay, 5. Alright, see, we're here. But I was raised in Asomada, in the interior of Santiago. How many people from Santiago here? Okay, alright. How many non-Cape Verdeans do we have here? This is great. See, I had to switch my whole, presentation up because, I was going to tell you guys about Cape Verde, but after that great videos, unfortunately, I have to now make up things as I go. But actually, I was born in as mentioned before, I was born in Fogo and I was raised in Santiago. And being raised in Santiago, sometimes, especially in Asomada, many people call that the birthplace of the revolution of Cape Verde, because much of the movement happened in that region. When I speak of movement, I'm talking about the revolution of Cape Verde, which happened, anybody quiz over here. When did we get our independence? 75. What's that? Which day? When it began? When did it begin? 73. Actually, you have one right, which is 3. But actually the war began in 1963. But all the meetings and everything happened way before then. And so, growing up over there, I was infused by much of the culture. Prior to the independence of Cape Verde, many of our traditional rituals, from dances to music, were prohibited. Many of the people could not practice, from Funana to Batu. at the same time, as I was exposed to that after the independence, when I was born, I was exposed to my father, who took and was a big part of the revolution in Cape Verde. He was amongst the many youth who fought for the independence of Cape Verde. Many people believe that there were elders and, well-to-do, wise men who felt that Cape Verde needed to change. But that's not the case. The people who actually fought for the independence of Cape Verde were between the ages of 14 to 18. Some up to no further than 25. And these were young men and women at your age who felt that a change was needed in our community. And it's the same change and the same impact that I feel that nowadays we need in our community, because that fight is not over. See, I grew up with this idealism, as I call it, from my father, but as well as that culture that my mother brought in. I was exposed to much of the arts. Once I migrated to the US, I think that question came in: who am I as a Cape Verdean? What am I doing here? Why do these people speak of me in such manner? No, I am not the gangster you think that I am. I speak like this because I'm proud to be who I am. So, once I moved to Connecticut, I began getting myself involved in a lot of different programs, artistic programs, getting myself involved in many things that my grandfather and my parents exposed me to in Cape Verde. Because back then I never realized what they were, but now I realize that a lot of these programs, from the carnival, from the shows, from all these different activities that we consistently had, it's not something that we do, but it's something that we are. It's embedded in us, in our veins. It's something that I share with many of my friends, and I'm here sharing with you. And I realized more and more as time went by that that blood, that cultural sort of manifestation that we have was not just, something that we used to look good or feel good about it. But it was always a weapon. It was that weapon of change. It was that weapon that had brought us from slavery to the revolution to where we are now. It is that weapon that kept this together. Many people, when they talk about culture, which I will align with arts, they don't know how to define it. What is culture? Sometimes someone said that, culture, think of it as a big ocean, right? And when you go and look inside the ocean, you go deep, you're going to see many different species of fish, all kinds of things. And we try to identify all these things being part of these different cultures, but we neglect to acknowledge. And if I mention to you, what do you see at that moment? You'll describe all these different cultures, but you'll neglect to see the water and acknowledge that water as the culture. That water is what keeps us together. That water is the soul and the spirit of all Cape Verdeans. And the reason why I mentioned about the soul and the spirit, it is that water that brought Africans from the mainland to Cape Verde, into the New World. Many suffered. Many went through a lot. But I learned through our lessons, through the Panitara, through Baduk, through all these different cultural manifestations, that they mentioned that they can kill us physically, but they'll never kill us spiritually. And that's how our culture has survived for many years. For me, the second most important part of our culture, something that happened in our history, is the concentration camp in Cape Verde. Many of you, probably, I don't know if you were here, about a month ago in Bridjewater, you had a presentation by a man who was once imprisoned at this concentration camp. For many of you guys that don't know, in 1963, as we mentioned before, the revolution officially began. But way prior to that, in 1933, Hitler came in power. At that time, the Nazi, the Gestapo police, and the PD from Portugal, under the leadership of Antonio Salazar, they were collaborating and working together. And they wanted to open up a lab, a place where they would pretty much torture political prisoners, and Cape Verde was the place. And that's when they opened that concentration camp. From that era until 1974. Not many people know about this. And that's the reason why I do what I do as an artist, and how I use the arts as an avenue to talk about not only our history, but how we can move forward, and how we can use that spirit, that water, as a weapon for change in our community right now, as we see. So, let me take you a little bit through a journey of some of the work that I've been a part of, and I share so much passion with it. So, in Connecticut, I was a part of a program called Center for Creative Youth. Center for Creative Youth is a program it's an arts program that brought in over 185 students from all over the country as well as from outside. And the purpose of the program was to focus on leadership through the arts. I attended this program for many years. I eventually became an assistant teacher at the program, and I worked there for about 2 years. I went back to Cape Verde when my grandmother passed away, stood there for about 2 months. And during that time, I began to notice a lot of things, something that was very interesting in Cape Verde, which I couldn't find over here. My frustration in the US became that we had everything. All the youth that were taking art classes had all the technical skills, but they lacked that passion I found in Cape Verde. That passion that I saw youth with no resources, nothing at all, but they went day in and day out, and they did it. They found ways to make things happen. It reminded me of myself when I started my first band when I was about 13 years old. I was the drummer. Kalu, you're gonna like this right here. And in my drums, I had cans of milk in a little vial, which is a little containers of oil that they used to import into Cape Verde. And that's how we made our sounds.
Copycat.
Copycat, see? And we jammed and performed everywhere, carrying on that spirit. So, I felt it was only right that I would give at least one opportunity to one Cape Verdean to be able to experience what I had experienced. When I came, I lost a lot of self-esteem, I lost a lot of pride. I was in an area where I didn't quite know myself. I would look at others and question. I would look at everyone and question. I didn't understand why we all came in different shades, why some are lighter than the others. Then who am I as a Cape Verdean? But once I went into that program, I realized more and more who I was, and through the arts I began to discover and explore myself, and wanting to do more, and combining that passion that my parents brought to me as well as my grandparents, especially when it came down to the social service. I knew what I wanted to do. So eventually, I was able to bring 2 students from the Cape Verde Islands into this program, Center for Creative Youth. After a very successful summer, the organization agreed to go to Cape Verde and open up a sister program, or Center for Creative Youth, in Cape Verde Islands, called Katuta. And that was in 2003. I was pretty young at that time. And it was the first time that the government of Cape Verde had ever implemented an arts education program in the history of Cape Verde that would impact not just one region, but all of the islands of Cape Verde. So as you see in this image here, we held classes. It was a 2-week intensive program. We held classes in visual arts, theater, music, instrumental and vocal, as well as dance. And the reason why we use these art forms is because, as you well know, art can cost a lot. So it's what we can bring and utilize ourselves, once again, as a vehicle and as that resource. And these are some of the programs where the youth came in. Now, if you can notice, all the youth that participated in the program were not just Cape Verdeans. They were all Cape Verdeans coming from all different islands, as well as we brought in American youth coming from different nationalities into Cape Verde. And we combined the classes both with a Cape Verdean and an American teacher, where for weeks they worked together. And then when they met for 3 days, they built a curriculum together, combining both the American experience as well as the Cape Verdean experience together, teaching the youth both how we walk and speak and we navigate through the same waters. In the arts was the language that they spoke. It was unbelievable to see these youth come together. The concern was, I don't speak English. Well, I don't speak Creole. How will we speak to each other? How will we understand each other? And I remember the first day that the youth came from the US, and I brought a couple of youth from Cape Verde. And they met in the airport as I was waiting for more coming from the different islands. They stood in the corner looking at each other. They didn't know what to say to each other. But the most beautiful thing was when the American guitarist pulled out his guitar, and the Cape Verdean guitarist pulled out his guitar, and they began playing. And they played for 2 weeks straight, non-stop. And it was a language that they both understood. And I'm proud to say that that young Cape Verdean guitarist just won the first Cape Verdean Music Award because he was the youngest member of Cardinals du Sol. And that makes me proud. So the program has continued and has had a big impact because all these years, what we did with the program is that we not only taught leadership, but we also taught culture and history. They went on different trips, visited many different cultural sites, including the concentration camp. In this picture, you see the component about leadership. After they learned many of different skills, technical skills, they were in charge of putting the curriculum together and then going out into the countryside and educating other Cape Verdeans on how to sing, the right ways to sing, the right ways to do many things. Many of the techniques in music. And the young lady you see holding the hands of the young man, her name is Jocelyn Medina. Jocelyn is someone who took advantage of that program. When we go there, we do auditions in all different islands because we try to seek for that youth. It's not just about how much you know, it's about the passion and how much do you want to know. And we found that in her. Jocelyn is another example. She recently just came out of doing the Portuguese version of American Idol and came off in the top 10. And now she's becoming this huge hit in Cape Verde. It makes me proud once again to go to an island in Saint-Andon and see this young Creola who questioned herself. I saw myself in her. To then, through arts, utilize that, through this resource, through this opportunity, as a way for her to take on her own initiative. The concern with many people is, we don't have anything here. How can we do what we do? Well, she realized that I don't need anybody or anything to do what I do. My strongest resource is myself. And she was able to do it for herself. And when we talk about the impact, this is the last day. And you see the American and the Cape Verdean. They were all kind of hugging each other, crying at that day. And especially here, I enjoyed this image to the right, just by the smile. And it's great to see all these youth that came from different islands. Oftentimes, we hear, as Cape Verdeans, we hear about the separation.